Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you, Taylor Swift. The homeless shouldn't be shitting in supermarkets. They should be shitting in toilets in government provided housing. Because honestly, what we've found is the best way to deal with homeless people is just to give them houses for free. No joke. That's actually the cheapest option, by the way. Um, Housing the homeless is cheaper. Yeah, here we go. Look at it's fizz.org. Providing housing for homeless is cheaper and better for society. Says physics, apparently. Um, it is cheaper to provide last resort housing to homeless people than to leave them sleeping rough, a new report from the University of Melbourne has found. Each bed provided by the government provides an average net benefit of $10,000 per year, according to comprehensive cost-benefit analysis commissioned by the University of Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute. The university partnered with consulting firm SGS Economics and Planning, which undertook the analysis. We found that governments and society benefit more than they spend by providing last resort housing to homeless individuals. Um, Said Ellen Witt, the director of SGS and the report's lead author. This is mainly through reduced healthcare costs, reduced crime, and people getting back into employment or education. There is much to gain in economic and social terms, both for government and society, by assisting the homeless. The supply of last resort housing has actually dropped in inner Melbourne while demand continues to peak. Demand is primarily driven by housing unaffordability, people escaping domestic violence, and a structural lack of social housing. Um, so basically, this report, which was made for Melbourne, to be fair, indicates that if you give people houses, if you provide for people in that way, if you have, for example, decommodified housing, um, it turns out that you actually gain a larger net benefit because it turns out having a bed reduces a whole lot of other problems that homeless people have. So, if your main problem in California is people shitting in supermarkets because they're homeless and not getting like the care and housing that they need, well, then the solution is very simple. You need to house your homeless population in homes that they actually would want to live in or be able to live in. Um, if you did that, you would actually have more money to spend on society at large. So, something to think about there, I think. Paid for by who? The taxpayer. Like if taxpayers pay for homeless people to be housed, um, well, no, Wagonator, you would pay to have housing built. Um, the idea, though, is that when you pay for housing to be built, homeless people wind up costing the state less money. So, in effect, every time you give a homeless person housing, you're getting roughly $10,000 in additional benefit that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So, basically, for every homeless person you house, you're going to make 10,000 more dollars, roughly, on average. That's what that report is saying. So, you could probably house them for less, like, and that's taking into consideration like the cost of housing them. Um, well, I mean, you probably don't want to do that. Like Wagonator, I don't know how you're like making this mental connection with like how that would work, but like I'm all for decommodifying housing and having like a base level of living available for everyone. So like, sure, do that. Do that in the society that I would like to see built, where we solve homelessness. Okay. Um, what's the point of buying a home then? Well, the point would be, Taylor Swift, that the last resort housing for homelessness probably wouldn't be like really high end or quality stuff, right? Like, you would probably have to, it would probably be small. It would probably be like, relatively lower quality, I guess. Um, but the idea would be that it would be free for anyone to use if they need it. Um, which would also be a boon for like survivors of domestic violence. Like if battered women need a place to go, they can just go and stay at one of these places. Um, it's very I all of the data that I have seen about this, by the way, indicates that if you give homeless people housing, if you house homeless people, um, crime goes down. Um, you know, healthcare costs go down. Um, all kind there are all kinds of net benefits to society because you don't have desperate people on the street interacting with people who are trying to live their daily lives and you know turns out when you combine desperate people with everyday normal people, more crime is going to happen. um Also, it would probably create more jobs if there are government contractors or government employees building these things. That's more jobs, so better for the overall economy. Um, I don't know. There's not really a downside. Saves you money. It saves the taxpayers money. Uh, you eliminate homelessness as a problem. The only problem is there are people like you guys who hear this idea of, oh, well, let's just give homeless people homes, and they think it's just ridiculous on its face, even though the math of every study that I've ever read about this completely backs up that, yeah, if you build homeless people homes, and when by homes doesn't necessarily mean like a house with a white picket fence, it can mean like a large apartment complex of some kind. But if you build people that and make it available to homeless people, then yeah, it actually saves money for society. Oh, it's true, Taylor Swift. US fascists don't believe in humanity, but that's because they are largely composed of the weakest elements of our society, the weakest, most fragile, and most afraid elements of our society. Um, yeah, actually, Wagonator, yeah, pretty much. Because then they aren't living their day-to-day life trying to scrape together enough money to have a bed for the night. Instead, they can like shower up and like start applying to jobs and like don't have to worry about dying on the street. Um Also in these large complexes where it's been tried, you can also make available a lot of social services like mental health specialists for these people to use. So that means they can get the treatment they need. So you don't have like murmuring crazy people ready to snap because they're living homeless on the street and are under so much pressure every day that eventually they go in and pull a knife on someone in a convenience store. Instead, they are getting the counseling they need to live like a normal life, and like they have access to a shower and can sleep someplace that's warm and safe at night, and have like a place to keep their belongings, where like the police aren't just gonna like overturn their cart and like shoo them away from a location. Like, no, it's a net benefit, and it's very clearly a net benefit. It's quite easy to tell. Um, and that's again, that's not just me saying that. It's like scientists who study homelessness, because there are such a thing as that. Like, here, I'll bring up another study. Okay, um, housing the homeless is cheaper. Here we go. I'll bring up a couple. Okay, here. Here's an article from Vox, from a few years ago, 5 years or last year, I guess, updated last year. Even as the national economy continues its slow but steady pace of improvement, data released by the Department of Housing and Urban Development in December revealed a small increase in the number of homeless Americans, a consequence of systematic housing shortages in many U.S. metro areas. Okay. HUD volunteers try and count up all the homeless people living in America. This counts critical. Some research on this has produced truly mind-boggling results, like a Central Florida Commission on homelessness study indicating the region was spending about triple on policing homeless people's nonviolent rule breaking as it would cost to get each homeless person a house and caseworker. So in Florida, in Central Florida, they put together a commission on homelessness to study the effects in the region, and what they found was that they were spending 3 times as much money, like 3 times as much money on just police going to homeless people's encampments over nonviolent rules. And if they instead use that money, they could just send homeless people. They could put homeless people in a house and give them a caseworker. Yeah, like, and you know what? There are some other studies that are a little bit less enthusiastic, apparently, but they're still positive. And also, this was just taking into account the cost of policing those homeless people. It's not taking into account the increased medical costs that homeless people face, or any of the other additional costs. Okay. Let's see. 2017 Rand Corporation analysis of the Housing for Health program in LA County concluded that the county saved about 20% by putting people with complex mental health issues in supportive housing rather than relying on law enforcement and emergency room visits. Weird. A 2015 randomized control trial of a housing first approach across several Canadian cities saw essentially no change in money spent. Canada's structurally lower healthcare costs are likely a factor here, but gains in quality of life and community functioning. So basically, in 2015, they found that for no additional cost to the taxpayer, they could house homeless people. And at no additional cost, improve the quality of their lives and the quality, like how well their community functions together. In another trial in Toronto, they found that Housing First was effective in combating alcohol abuse disorders. So, like, seem to be like a lot of benefits here. Benefits ranging from saving $10,000 to 20%, whatever that is. We could probably look more into the study if I clicked on that link there. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits. It just runs counterintuitive to what you think people deserve because they're homeless. No, well, Taylor Swift, do you think they shouldn't be bailed out and should instead be a burden on your taxes? Because that's what happens instead. Would you rather punish people and pay more in taxes, or would you rather pay less in taxes and also take care of homelessness? Um, I feel like the obvious answer here, especially because you were just recently shitting on California for its homelessness problem, is very clearly that you should house the homeless and save money on your taxes. Um, why don't you let a homeless person live with you if it's such a benefit? Well, because the housing first initiatives aren't just housing homeless people with people who are already housed. They are housed in special housing units that are made available to the general public at large. I don't know why you aren't understanding that. I don't know why you're not understanding that, like, a government program is different than an individual taking action. No, I want to help the homeless along with everyone else to save our society collectively money and suffering. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. because like my the amount that I can accomplish by myself is insignificant compared to what the government at large can accomplish. Because the government is actually surprisingly good at doing certain things like building housing for people on a larger scale. Well, because the idea would be, Wagonator, that you're giving people a baseline of security, and from there they can then go on to try and accumulate wealth and buy a car of their own without worrying about winding up on the street, without worrying about lacking mental health care, etc., etc. Why should we, though? Well, it reduces crime. It reduces the cost on the taxpayers. I feel like there are only net benefits here, and the only reason you're knee jerk like against this idea is because you think that poor people deserve to be poor. We Right, but the thing is, it'd be a lot society would be a lot better if we had that baseline of security, Taylor Swift. For example, we wouldn't have to put up with homeless people sitting on the street and increasing crime in certain areas. People would no longer have to, police wouldn't have to waste their time patrolling homeless encampments because the homeless would just have homes. Like, are you saying you want there to be homeless crime? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that, like, you want to live in a society where the homeless present a risk to you, and where you have to be afraid? Instead of taking a very reasonable solution that actually lowers your tax burden and honestly helps everyone involved. Like, yeah, I worked hard and I achieved something. So that means fuck everyone who didn't achieve as much as I did. Oh, but Danny the Ram, what if they stab you? What if they stab you for their crystal meth? Because homeless crime isn't limited to homeless people. Um, like, I don't know what to tell you, but like, crime affects more than just poor people, but poor people are more likely to commit crime. So we should be providing homeless people with homes because it effectively reduces crime and costs less to the taxpayer. I think if you're arguing against that, you are just arguing because you want more people to suffer for no reason other than it makes you feel a little bit better about your own self. Which, frankly, I don't think is a very compelling argument, okay? Um, a homeless person burns his house down through negligence. Do we buy him a new one? Wagonator, I don't know what you're talking about, but I have a feeling that, like, most people aren't burning their house down through negligence. I have a feeling that's not a very common thing that happens. And in like the way that I'm picturing it, it would be a large apartment complex. So likely the entire thing wouldn't burn down. It would just have to be repaired. And I would hope that there would be a good enough supply that like of this housing that they could just get another apartment and get the mental help they need to be more competent in the future. Yeah. Yeah, what happens if they wake up and they're suddenly a giant fly? What happens then, huh? Do we just have to put up with giant flies existing as homeless people now? Except now they have homes, so they're just giant flies living in homes now. Damages occur living in a house, would taxpayers? Yeah, taxpayers would have to pay to maintain the homes. And like Wagonator, they wouldn't own the homes. Like they wouldn't like it wouldn't be like they are just given a condo that they now own. They would just be able to stay in a place without rent for a while, for however long that is. Um, and maybe a knock-on effect of this would be that it would lower rent prices elsewhere because frankly, rent in the United States of America is too damn high, as the classic line goes. No, Danny the Ram, I reject your way of thinking outright. I think that even if people aren't productive, they deserve to live. For example, I think that people with physical disabilities deserve to live. I think that people with mental disabilities deserve to live, even if they can't work as much as able-bodied, able-minded people. I think that they have just as much a right to existing as you or I. Um, and frankly, the idea that just because they're not productive and making something for you, that they deserve to die is a pretty sad way to live, man. Especially because we all eventually break down. Our human machines eventually break, and we become old. Are you just saying we should let old people die? Wait, do you want to live in a Logan's Run society? I might be actually. You know what? I could get behind that. You're saying like at the day we all turn 21, we get carted off to some sort of crystal farm and get turned into goo to power the engines that give electricity to the world or something like that. Um, I guess I would be down for that. Like you want to become a goo with me, and we can power the universe together. Um, oh, I'm not gonna ban you. But I also think that your ideology is really simple and probably more based on whatever personal experience you've had with homeless people. Because to be honest, like housing people is just a good thing to do because they're fellow human beings who are suffering. Um, and I think it's a generally good thing to reduce suffering in the world. I don't know. Maybe a base principle that I operate upon. Um, Otherwise, if you're just out here to like punish people, I have no interest in punishing people. I'm far more interested like it's like the whole conversation that occurs around like pedophiles. Like there are a sizable number of people who will just say, "Yeah, we should execute pedophiles. Fuck pedophiles." And it's like, "Oh, well, okay. Like I could get behind that, but let's look at the data. If you do that, what happens?" Well, actually what happens is that more kids get abused by pedophiles. So my position is that I want to reduce the amount of child abuse in the world. So what are the policies that we can take that reduce the amount of child abuse done by pedophiles? And it turns out if you make treatment available to pedophiles, you get less child abuse in the world. And while that's not as immediately satisfying as like executing pedophiles and making them suffer or whatever, I don't care about executing pedophiles and making them suffer. That's not my base principle. My base principle is making sure that kids aren't getting abused. So, like, people who value inflicting pain and making the unjust suffer are not people that I find are making compelling arguments when they're just trying to make their own feelings feel good and at the expense of, like, children getting raped, okay? So, like, that's my position. Oh, I mean, Wagonator, I have my ideas are backed up by data. Your ideas are basically fuck data and let homeless people die. I just listed to you several different studies where that show that housing people is actually cheaper and better for society and reduce crime. So like, well, you're right, Vox isn't data, but it's linking to data that is provided by the government. Here's the Rand Corporation. Evaluation of housing, permanent supportive housing program. We can look at the key findings. Clients' use of public services, especially medical and mental health services, dropped substantially, including emergency room visits and inpatient care. Costs, correspondingly, also decreased. Across all the services examined, the associated costs for public services consumed in the year after the receipt of supportive housing declined by close to 60%. Participants' self-reported mental health functioning improved after receiving housing, though self-reported physical health was largely unchanged. Although the number of individuals arrested and the number of jailed arrests decreased during the year after receiving housing, the number of jail days increased following the PSH entry by an average of 2.76 days. So, like, this shows that actually, yeah, this did save a lot of money to the taxpayer. These are information backed policies. Um, and yeah, OMG Taylor Swift. when people have access to like services that let them find jobs, and they're given houses, they're no longer on the street to beg for money, and instead are spend their time getting the mental health care they need to get them stable enough to function in society and work jobs. So yeah, these people are then better set up to work jobs because it turns out it's a lot easier to get a job when you have a place to live and you can like shower and clean your clothes. Things like that make it a lot easier to get a job in the United States. So yeah, these policies would make it so that there are less, if not more, less, if not no people coming up to your car for money. Okay, that's basically what this translates to. So that was one study, and remember, I did show you this other study. Where was that? Oh, here we go. There was this other study. Here we go. The oops. Here is the University of Melbourne study. Here are the key findings. And you can find it, the case for investing in last resort housing. Let's see. Let's see. Basically, a lot of these are just covering the need for more last resort housing. The analysis shows that the government providing one last resort bed will generate a net benefit of $216,000 over 20 years. That averages to a net benefit of $10,800 per year. Basically, for every $1 invested in last resort beds, $2.70 worth of benefits are generated for the community over 20 years. So yeah, basically, building more new permanent last resort housing facilities helps the homeless, saves the government money, makes communities safer, and generally, yeah, it's a good thing to do because you're helping people as well. On top of that. Honestly, Wagonator, yeah, I'm down for the government decommodifying healthcare, housing, electricity, internet, all kinds of things. I'm down for them decommodifying everything that a human being might need in order to live in a modern society. I'm down for that. Um, so like your argument of being like really hyperbolic is actually my position because providing everybody all of those things would provide a net benefit to society and enable more people to work and be more efficient doing their work and produce more. Um so like you're so close to getting it. You're so close to getting it. Um there have always been lazy people in human history and there always will be. You and your Well, no, Danny the Ram, I would like to live in a world where people aren't required to work in order to survive. So my position is that we should be working towards a world in which people can pursue their passions. And some people are really passionate about farming. Some people are really passionate about raising animals. Some people are passionate about art or computers or whatever. Whatever it might be, I would like people to be able to pursue it to the fullest degree possible. And I would like them to be able to do that in a world where that empowers them to do that. Um, and if people don't want to work, I'm fine with that too. We should live in a world where people don't have to work. And that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of work, but I think we could do it. How long have I been streaming? Coming up on 3 hours. Guys, I always like start my stream. I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough content for today, and then we get involved in these long conversations, and I realize that actually there's a whole lot to talk about. There are a lot of ideas that I'm able to fully grasp and are very new for all of you. So I'm more than happy to like buckle down and talk about them with you guys. Um, but I just want you to know that like there's data attached to a lot of the things that I talk about. Um, for example, when it comes to worker co-ops being more efficient than traditional companies, uh, that's true. You can look that up. There are facts available to you about all of these things that I say. Um, and often after the show, after the stream finishes, and I break things up into highlights, I um, throw links in of things that I talked about and mentioned, so you guys can look up at least some of the things I'm talking about. Um, Well, Danny the Ram, that I mean that's part of my argument. We shouldn't have obscenely wealthy people. Like if wages had kept track with productivity since 1970, the average salary of the working person in the United States would be over $100,000. We have the ability to make a world possible where these things exist, where we have housing for everyone, where we have like basic staple foods available for everyone, where we have electricity available for everyone, um, and people don't have to pay for these things. We could make that society today if we wanted to. Um, but the issue is that there are people like you who don't really understand why we should do that, despite the suffering of tens of millions of people in this country. Um, but I'm hopeful that's why I made this channel, because I want to be able to reach people like you and get you to understand that there are these things we could do, these very reasonable science-backed things to improve our society. Um, but like it's weird. So I want to know like why when I present you with this data, why do you think it is better to punish homeless people than to like lower the tax burden on society, than lowering crime, than giving suffering, in danger people homes? Like, why do you think it is better to make people suffer than it is to solve several of society's major ills? Like, I don't get it. Like, why do you want to live in a society with crime? I like answer me that. Why is a crime society good for you? Um well, Danny the Ram, the hypothetical you have so wait, so you see globalization as a problem just like me? Well, I actually don't see globalization as the problem. I see capitalism as the problem. Because the thing is, capitalism is the reason your wages get driven down by further interconnecting our world. I don't actually think that globalization is a problem. I think that capitalism is the problem. Um, what happens if we all simultaneously stop wanting to work? Well, I don't think that'll happen because that has literally never happened in the entire history of the human race. Um, so I just don't think it'll happen. We're not wired to not work. So there will always be people who want to work or who want to pursue their passions or what have you. And also, rich people at the very top, they are not the ones innovating. It's always the workers. So innovation will still happen. People will still work. Even if we achieved like the utopian level of development that I'm proposing. But also, I'm not so naive that we're going to get there without a lot of work. So, like, my proposal is initially that we should adopt worker co-ops. And worker co-ops are found to be more efficient and have happier workers, and uh, they're more resilient to market forces. So, like, there are literally no downsides to having worker co-ops as a standard business model. Um, so, like, that would be one of the first small steps that I would take to move our society in that direction. Um, and every step after that would be something that is backed up by the scientific process. like giving homes to homeless people. Because honestly, I don't give a shit about your personal opinions about whether or not homeless people deserve to be punished. What I give a shit about is just, uh, you know, doing the things that are efficient and backed up by science.